The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are those of the producer and those appearing in the show and do not necessarily represent the views of DerryCam, the Town of Derry, or any of its staff or affiliates. Hi, I'm Anthony Henry. Welcome back to America's Ass. We've been gone for a while. I think this might be the longest break I've taken, but been traveling, finished up junior year. I started senior year this week. We're rolling, and we're on episode 71, and we are already back in the election cycle. We're going to have some local city elections in Manchester coming up. We have people entering the congressional races and the Senate races. We'll be talking to some of them in the next few weeks, including our guest today for our Season 7 premiere. Please welcome Chris Bright. Thank you for coming on. Introduce yourself to anyone who doesn't know you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Henry. I'm Chris Bright. I'm a Republican running for Congress here in the 1st Congressional District, and launched this race back in June. And it's a little bit early to be talking about CD1 and Congress, but with this being an open seat, it really kind of created some musical chairs when Senator Shaheen stepped down and everybody, kind of started to rally up on the Democratic side. We knew we had to get in, right? And so it's been a very, very busy summer. And so far we're off to a pretty strong start.
Yeah, I've been following. It seems like you guys are on the ground. You got events every day.
We have, yeah. I mean, here in New Hampshire, you win elections in people's backyards and on the patio, and heck, you and I were talking over 4th of July in a backyard. I think that's when we kind of agreed to do this, right? Yeah. So you have to take advantage of that, and we wanted to get out. I ran last cycle as a brand new incumbent. Incumbent. I ran as kind of a no-name against Pappas as an incumbent, and we had a really strong showing. So wanted to kind of take all those lessons learned after last cycle and really kind of synthesize what we could do better. And we architected a new campaign, and we've been executing against that since June. So lots of momentum. We're talking about building a youth coalition. We've got a veterans coalition coming on board. We've got about 45 supporters from the State House, State Senate on board, some really good fundraisers coming up, and just a tremendous amount of momentum. So really excited about the direction. And look, this election is going to mean something. I mean, we say that every year, right? Everybody always says, oh, it's the most important election. But, CD1, because of redistricting and what's going on in other parts of the country, really has the potential, and we're being told this by both the White House and the National Republican Congressional Committee, that CD1 is going to be one of the 5 races that could potentially determine outcome for control of Congress. So, stakes are huge. And there's a lot of important issues that we need to get out there and discuss. And so I'm happy that people are paying attention.
So what made you decide to actually get involved?
First time or second time?
Wherever you want.
The first time, I'm a West Point grad. Left for West Point 5 days after graduating high school. And, when you get there, it's all about duty, honor, and country, and selfless service. And then, of course, embarked on a very successful military career. And when I was in the military and over in Bosnia and over in Kosovo, did a lot of geopolitical work. So in Bosnia, went into this town called Srebrenica, and they had mass genocide there, and every male over the age of 14 was killed. And I showed up there about a year after this happened, and one of my early jobs was to go into Srebrenica and work with these women and really help them establish businesses and kind of help them recover from this absolute travesty. And so, that instilled in me, I think at an early age, I was probably 23, 24 at the time, what it means to kind of be a part of something bigger than yourself. And as I got promoted, I grew in the Army, found myself over in Kosovo, and again, more kind of nation building geopolitical work. So we built some schools and bridges. In fact, one of the crowning moments over there went into Pasjani, Kosovo, and I was working with this all Albanian group. And the sector was divided into the East and the West. And so we were in Multinational Brigade East, which was the American sector. and then the Russian sector, which was kind of co-located with the French, they were in the Serbian kind of area of the country. And they were doing a lot of work with the Serbs. And so what started to happen was the Albanians felt like these guys weren't impartial. And so they started to attack the Russian and French forces. And so the Americans said, we have to go in and we have to be more impartial. So Bright, you've been working with this group called the TMK, which was the Kosovo Protection Corps. And they were all Albanian. Take them into this town, Pasjani, which is all Serb, and build a bridge. And that was a tough ask, right? Because these people hated each other. And so, over the course of 4 or 5 months, at one point I had a bounty on my head from this like local Muslim extremist group out there. But we pushed through and we figured out a way to get this bridge built and get these guys to work together. And I spearheaded this effort to get the Albanians and Serbs to work together in Kosovo for the first time since the war broke out. And then we also built some schools and staffed it. My sister was a teacher down in Jacksonville, Florida, and we staffed this with schools or with books and school supplies, and all of that at just this early age really made me feel like, wow, this is my calling, right? To serve and to kind of use my leadership skills for the greater good. When the war broke out, when 9/11 happened, I was over in Kosovo, so instantly we went to war and the whole world changed. I lost 19 of my West Point classmates in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it got to the point where, got out of the Army, went to grad school, MIT, which is what brought me up here, and just fell in love with New England and Derry. I moved here right out of getting out of the Army 21 years ago, and then kind of put my roots down here and built a family, and kids went to school at Pinkerton, and the rest is history. And so I'm passionate about this country and how awesome it is and the different opportunities that it presents, and to see kind of the direction that we've been going for the last 20 years. We're polarized. I feel like we've lost under the Biden administration, and even under Obama, when he drew the red line in the sand and Bashar al-Assad over in Syria went right up to it and crossed. I just feel like the United States doesn't stand for like what it used to. We're polarized here. We've got a rising threat in China. Our economy's been tough. People have been struggling. And the people that I've looked to change it have fallen down, right? They're not there for the right reasons. They're there for personal gain. Maybe they're not qualified, right? They just had a lot of money and were able to buy themselves into a seat without having the real experience to solve problems. And all of that fundamentally bothers me. I feel like public service is supposed to be about putting the needs ahead of your own. And so, at West Point, one of the things we were taught was coming out of the Civil War, like during that battle, a West Pointer commanded on either side of every single battle in the Civil War. They fought brutally against each other. But when the war was over, during Reconstruction, they credited kind of these West Point generals as coming back and having that West Point bond to help rebuild the country. And that always resonated with me. And I felt like strong leaders need to step up in times where we need leadership. And I feel fortunate to have a lot of these experiences that I think could actually lend themselves to some real solutions in Washington, D.C., whether it's working on the economy or affordable housing or securing our borders or strengthening, America's standing on the global stage. These are all things I've been a part of and worked on. And, I'd like to take that to Washington, D.C. and start solving some of these problems and put the partisan politics and the bickering aside and really just focus on what we need to get done.
What do you think New Hampshire's priorities would be in Congress? What would New Hampshire citizens want to see in Congress, and what would they get out of you?
Yeah, so great question. We're talking to these people. Like, we've spent this whole summer grinding and really trying to figure out, I had a political thesis on what we need, and it was pretty spot on, right? Granite Staters, they want a strong economy. They want to be proud to be Americans, right? This is a purple state. So it's a state that's really tuned into the issues and votes along the the policy and the individual issues and not necessarily one party or another. And I respect that. I like an informed voter base that's willing to kind of put the politics aside. So, what we want to focus on are things that matter to Granite Staters. Energy prices, affordable housing. Our border is closed right now, but it's really been done through executive order. So these types of protections that we have right now need to be codified into law. And then some of the more local issues that you're seeing, like the girls' sports. People think that it's, seeing kind of the wackiness of like having some of these men playing in women's sports. They just want to have, kind of a return to normalcy and focus on things that allow them to work hard, get ahead because of the efforts that they do, and have a limited government that's sparingly taking money out of their pockets. And when they do, they're deploying it and they're spending our tax dollars on things that matter to us, and they're doing it in an efficient way. So those is my big overarching umbrella. It's like, okay, limited government, free markets. Let's project strength on the national stage so that we don't have to fight endless wars, but we can at least shape the world that's favorable to us. And let's do things that are going to strengthen our economy and allow, folks like you, Anthony, to buy a house. I don't know how someone like you, 5, 6, 7 years when you graduate college and you're looking to start a family, how you buy a house right now. And there's things from a policy perspective we can do to solve some of these problems. I just don't think we've had leadership that's been courageous enough to take action.
Or bureaucracy hasn't allowed it to happen.
There's that too, right? I liked what they were doing with Doge because government is incredibly ineffective. And I think anytime government shows up to say, we've got the solution to this, I think we all need to you're smirking right now. Like, government is not meant to solve some of these problems.
Gives me a throwback to the Derry School Board in 2024, 2023.
Yep. In what way?
Talked about it plenty on this show. We all remember when they closed the schools and then tried to open a new one for $72 million, all that.
Yep.
Reminds me of that because they wouldn't really let anyone have a say in that.
But then what happened, right? Like, we showed up, we voiced our concern, we kind of reorganized with Hood and, West Runningbrook and tried to be more efficient about like how we kind of allocated the middle school. Like, this is what I mean, like getting people to come to the table with some ideas instead of like the protests or the name calling or this or that. Like, let's actually show up with some solutions. And if we could have good civic discourse, let's talk through some of these different ideas and let's come up with a way that makes sense for people. But the polarization frustrates me because we retreat into these kind of Republican or Democratic camps to just fight with each other. And it's people like you and I that end up paying the price and looking at this dysfunction and saying, there's got to be a better way.
I couldn't have put it better myself. America has forgotten how to disagree. Mm-hmm. I'm very lucky to have some Democrats that I'm really good friends with. Nick Germana in Keene, for example, Jim O'Connell in Manchester is another, and plenty more. And when you find people that think like you in the way where they're not going to attack you if they disagree, they just want to talk and learn from you, and you learn from them, that's what real discourse is.
Yep, I agree.
And we've forgotten that.
Yeah. No, I mean, the world is too, or let's just even smaller, even just the issues that we face here in New Hampshire are too complex to just have a red solution and a blue solution, right? We need to be able to talk about this stuff. And, I own a business. I founded this business 7 years ago. And first couple jobs I did were like, the very first job was a ceiling tile job up in Waterville, Maine. Drove like 4 hours up there to put 110 ceiling tiles in through the night, make a couple $100. And, grind. And while I was building this business, you pivot over and over. You try something, it doesn't work. You try a different solution and you kind of work it until you're like, okay, now I've got a sustainable business model that's profitable and we could scale it. Well, it seems like in government, Republicans throw out something, Democrats just instantly oppose it, and vice versa, right? And then that becomes the solution. We don't sit down and say, well, some parts of your plan work and some plan, we've lost that ability to really tie down. In business, like when money's at stake and you're moving really quick, it's like, okay, that's a poor or that solution isn't working. Who else has an idea? Let's hammer it out and let's try something else. Like, that's where I think we can learn from kind of entrepreneurship and people that have had to solve problems for very complex, issues, and do it in a collaborative way where all we really care about is making progress. And if today it's not your solution, but overall everybody benefits from it, like, I'm all for that type of stuff and that type of collaboration.
And I think that's what makes New Hampshire politics so unique. And it's what makes Pappas and our two senators, Shaheen and Hassan, kind of stick out in that they fall into the national way of thinking. They don't think like New Hampshire politicians do.
Yeah, I could see that, and I think why somebody like Chris Pappas has been so successful for the last 80 years is he has really tried to strike a kind of bipartisan tone. I don't think he's been overly bipartisan. I mean, he still voted with that party, over 90% of the time. But, it's that willingness, though, that I think New Hampshire voters want to see. They have their principles and there's things that are important to us, and they want to see folks come to the table that align with the New Hampshire way of life and work together to try to solve problems. And they would rather have our problems solved than have it be a Republican, solution or a Democrat. They just want the problem solved. And how could you disagree with that kind of line of thinking?
So while we're on the topic of the state of New Hampshire, what do you think of the last year of New Hampshire government? By that, I mean Governor Ayotte and our legislature. Mm-hmm. How do you think they've done?
They certainly have the momentum, and they showed up in January ready to work. A lot of bills were put forward. We've made a lot of progress so far, and I think we're starting to see some real progress. I mean, we got EFAs passed, which I support. I feel like, anytime you introduce competition, that overall brings a better quality.
Anything.
Right? I think it gives people choice. We've done a great job with kind of taking a chip. I don't want to say we've solved the problem yet because we haven't, but, Manchester's homelessness problem, we're starting to, really crack down on some of this fentanyl stuff. Governor Sununu and and then Governor Ayotte have both really strengthened this, but that kind of Canadian partnership on patrolling the border. When our northern border was getting overrun, Sununu put a plan in place, and then Governor Ayotte has continued to strengthen that. I think that's made a real dent and secured our northern border. So we're making progress. I think what voters need to know is these types of things take a while. They take time. We live in an age where it's instant gratification. But I'm optimistic with the direction that things are going. I wish there were a couple bills that got vetoed that had upset people. I was one of the ones that was a bit frustrated with some of the bills that were vetoed. But, I'm willing to say, okay, we don't have to agree on everything. Overall trends, I'm happy and pleased with the direction things are going.
Yeah, I agree. I think things are overall going pretty well there. And how do you think the midterms will go for New Hampshire state politics, not the federal races?
Anthony, if I can get that one right, we'd be golden, right? It's such, who knows? I mean, it's a year out. Let's talk facts. So we know that historically, the midterm usually is a swing back from whatever party is in the White House. So we are keen and alert to the fact that there could be a swing back, from our Republican gains on the midterm. I personally am not feeling that right now. And as a Republican, that's empowering. I feel like the country is kind of like the platforms that Republicans are advancing, the Title IX, the men and women's sports, close the border. We've got to be strong on our economy, energy independence. These are what that independent group of voters here in New Hampshire, which is the plurality, I think it's like 41%. These are the types of issues that are important to them. And so for Republicans, at least here in the state, these are the things we are also aligned with and trying to work on. And we're seeing voter registration on the Republican side really pick up and outpace voter registration on the Democratic side. So all of these things and these indicators give me a sense of optimism that maybe this will be an anomaly where on the midterm, we're not going to see that swing back. But here's the thing. Over the last 3 or 4 midterm elections, we've seen an average of 64,000 voters drop off. And an election like CD1 is going to be determined by about 30,000 voters. So really 50% of the people that aren't going to show up is going to determine the outcome of control of Congress. Like that really could happen if New Hampshire CD1 is one of the 5 seats. And if 64,000 people don't show up, and if 30,000 of those voters are going to be the determining factor, then we have an obligation as a district here to really mobilize and get out and vote and not sit this one out because the stakes are really high.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, right.
People often sit out in the midterms because they don't.
Yeah.
It's not a presidential year.
Do you have a job yet?
I do. I have 2.
Okay. Yep. And so taxes are taken out and everything, right?
One of them.
One of them.
The other's under the table.
Okay.
Cash.
All right. Well, when kids like you start working and they all of a sudden, like my son Kevin, right? And he's working at Home Depot over in Londonderry, and he worked X amount of hours at Y rate, and he was expecting to see Z in his paycheck. And he didn't see Z. He saw Z minus 25% or something like that. And he's like, who is this FICA guy, right? Like, what is this?
Taxation is theft.
Who you vote for matters, right? And so if you want to see more social programs and this kind of spending and you want to give it to the government to allocate, then, that's one way of thinking. But like, I think people, you and I have had this conversation off camera about this, maybe that Gen Z that's kind of grown up and lived under the, this woke and kind of like newer, education system that we've seen. And now they get out and they start working and they're like,
this is what it's like.
This is what it's like, right? And now I understand why maybe fiscal conservatism or, government efficiency, why all these things are so important, because it really does take a big chunk out of a paycheck. And it's frustrating to see that money then sent over to Syria or these types of programs that don't align with American or Granite State values. Why am I funding that when, oh, by the way, eggs are 3 times what they used to be 2 years ago? Gas was expensive. Like, these are real questions. And quite frankly, under the Biden administration, these were like legit questions that I had and almost kind of compelled me to get into the race to say like, hey, enough is enough. Get your hand out of my pocket. And you're hurting people.
Last thing I'll ask before we wrap things up. What's your dream piece of legislation? If you could present any one thing when you get to Congress, what would it be? And I will ask this same question to all the federal candidates I have on this year.
If I had one piece of legislation, so my overarching goal for Congress and for government doesn't even revolve right now around legislation. I want to show people a better way of what a better leader in government can do. A leader that's accountable to people, that's willing to kind of listen to all, options and sides, that's willing to work not for personal gain, but really to deliver for the people that they've been entrusted to represent. To get elected to Congress, your actual title is representative. And you have to live up to that. You've got to go and you've got to meet, even as a Republican, you have to go and meet with the other half. You have to sit with these people that you represent, because you don't just represent the Republicans in CD1. You represent everybody. And so what are the issues that are really hurting people that we need to solve, that we need to think through? And you really need somebody that's there for the right reasons. And so my thing for going to Congress, yes, I want to strengthen our economy. I want to do things like eliminate 1031 tax loopholes to help affordable housing. I want the United States to stand for something on the international stage. I want to push back against China's Belt and Road Initiative that has signed 100-year trade agreements with 75% of the world's population and 50% of the world's GDP. Like, I want to do all of these things, but above all of that, I want to really get to a point where we could start to unite this country and get back to, being proud to be just an American, not an affinity group American, not an Italian American or an African American or an LGBTQ, right? American. And this is what we stand for. These are our principles, and to really kind of rally around that. And so I think you do that by leading by example. You don't get sucked into these kind of political attacks and attacking someone's character, but really debating on the issues and the policy and the how you would do it and the why you would do it, and being real and firm on that, but not getting personal. So
That's a good answer.
thank you.
All right, well, we are almost out of time, so feel free to close with anything you have.
Well, no, first of all, I love that you're doing this, Anthony. I think it's really good for, the younger generation to start to get involved and to talk about these things, because when we were in Bosnia, when we were in Kosovo, and we called it winning the hearts and minds over in the military, we didn't focus on the old guys like me, right? We focused on the younger generation who had to live with these policies that we're putting into play, get them involved. So keep doing what you're doing, right? The more we can educate people and talk about the issues in all these different forums, I think that does contribute to good civic discourse and will ultimately help bring us together. But this election's important, and we have to come together. We have to, vocalize what's important to us, and really pay attention, because there is outside money. We're seeing money coming in from California and New York already to influence the way that this race is going to wash out. And so this is a time for Granite Staters to really kind of show up. We've got to have that turnout next September and just get involved at any different level, because there's a lot of issues out there that are impacting people on an everyday basis, and we could solve them if we work together.
All right, well, I'll close with one other thing. I have a homework assignment for my viewers. Over the summer, while I was on break, I read a book that I'd heard about for a while, kind of changed my philosophy a bit about government. I want everyone watching to read Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand. I think you might have heard of that book before.
Oh, classic book. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Over 1,000 pages. It is a long read, very long read, very small print. It'll take you a while. But if you read that, just sit and think about it. It'll change your life. I'll end there. I'm Anthony Henry. This has been America's Ass. Thank you for watching.